Hey Rockstars, I'm JB, expert salesperson and master presenter.
I'm the doctor, psychologist, and behavioral expert.
This is the Entrepreneur Mastery Lab podcast.
We're high-performance coaches that help service-based professionals and entrepreneurs take their skills to the next level.
70% of entrepreneurs fail, which is why every week we have real talk with real entrepreneurs to help ensure you are not one of them.
We're also the inventors of the Be Rich mindset,
where we rise to mastery,
inspire greatness,
celebrate knowledge,
and help others along the way.
So join us in the lab.
And now, on to the show.
Welcome back to the Entrepreneur Mastery Lab. I'm JB.
I'm the doctor.
This is your first time joining us. Welcome to the lab, where we interview real professionals on a weekly basis, even if it's just the two of us. And we are super excited for a fantastic show. If you are a returning listener or viewer, thanks again for checking us out. We appreciate it. And I'm certain you've already gone ahead. You've liked, you've subscribed, you've followed, you've given us a 5-star review. Of course, if you haven't, what are you waiting for?
Slackers.
If you're new, I don't expect you to give us a like, subscribe, or follow yet. But within the next hour or so, I'm hopeful.
No, just do it now. Why wait?
Yeah.
Because you want to be prompt. You know, you put things off, you wait, you forget. It's not good. Just do it.
I like your way of thinking, Doc. So get on there. Give us some love. We appreciate you. Doc, it's good to see you again, buddy.
Isn't it always?
Yes. It's one of my favorites.
Speaking of seeing us, there is a great way that we can see us. And not everyone that listens to our podcast knows this, but we are also on YouTube. So the same thing that you are listening to, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you might be listening, you could also see us and our lovely faces and smiles and Rudolph's live on the YouTubes. And speaking of that, you can also see the gear that I'm wearing today.
Did you really just call off Rudolph's, really?
I didn't have to say what it was. If you're going to draw attention yourself, that's on you. I just kind of let it subtly in there. Like a nice inside.
All right. Yeah. Okay. What gear are you wearing? Let's put some attention on your gear.
Due to our special guest today, I brought out my scrubs that I haven't worn in quite a while. I used to wear this when I was working down the rehab center myself, doing a lot of brain injury rehab. So I always got to wear scrubs, which is great because then you never have to worry about what you're wearing to work. Very comfortable. So I busted them out today in honor of our guest.
You would never know. I mean, half of the people listening are just listening while they're driving, so they can't see you anyways. But you are so dark in that background, man. How can somebody even tell you're in scrubs? Stand up for us.
No.
Give us a little twirl. Give us a Cinderella twirl.
You have to pay extra for that.
All right. I didn't know it was scrub day. You know, I could have worn a pair of scrubs. I got a pair of scrubs as pajamas. I don't wear them often, but you know, if that's what we're into.
But no, you're not. You're not one of the super friends. You're just our trusty sidekick.
You know, I'm invited to the clubhouse too here. I'm allowed to be involved. You can't. This is not like there's inclusivity issues here with what you're telling me. I'm a little upset.
You're a trusty sidekick.
I'm gonna need to talk to my therapist about this.
You're fodder for the story.
You've just booked yourself another hour. Congratulations. This is how he keeps himself in business, in his other business. He just messes with me, and then he's like, "Oh, if you need some therapy, come find me later."
It's all part of the strategy.
Yeah. All right, Doc. Enough of this. I don't need to be a super friend. I've got a super friend waiting in the background. We just met, but I already really like her. We've got Dr. Christiana Marron joining us, who is a doctor of physical therapy. Dr. Christiana, welcome to the lab.
Good morning. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Now do us a favor, or I should say do our listeners and viewers a favor. Just share a little bit more about yourself so they know who you are and kind of what you're about, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys again for having me. I am Dr. Christiana Marron. I am a physical therapist, doctor of physical therapy out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I actually own my own practice right off of Broward Boulevard, downtown, very close to Las Olas. And I opened up my practice about 4 or 5 years ago, I'd say. I'm just about maybe hitting the 5-year mark. And I'm originally from New York. I came down here 6 years ago. You might not be able to tell, but Florida's kind of made its way into my life. But my story is pretty interesting, and I kind of get choked up when I talk about it because I don't really talk about it as much unless I'm on a beautiful podcast like yourselves and someone's asking me, why or how, or I have students asking me why or how. So I got into physical therapy when I was 14, 15 years old. My best friend's sister, who became a good friend of mine, was diagnosed with bone cancer. And I would take her to physical therapy. We would go to physical therapy together. And getting to see her become so lively afterwards, kind of get refilled, I was like, man, I want to have a job that makes me like feel like I'm, fulfilling someone like that, giving them a little light at the end of the tunnel, even though it feels like it's so far away. And, they always had me involved in stuff like that. Now, therapy back then, you're talking, I'm 32, so whatever, you can do the math on that. But, therapy was really different back then because the healthcare system was really different back then. And I'm going to tie this into kind of how I became into my private practice sector. But, it was a lot of one-on-one attention, and she thrived after therapy. And so, I just started cleaning tables at a local office in my town. And I'd always watch the therapist or, watch the aides, and they found that I was like super interested in this stuff. So then they allowed me to sit on evaluations, and then I worked my way up to becoming an aide in a whole, slew of different entities. So I was doing, volunteer work in a hospital. I was doing aide work in the hospital. I was doing aide work at a separate office just to get my feet wet and to also learn from a multitude of different areas. In physical therapy is so vast. You can go into pediatrics, you can go into acute settings, orthopedic settings. So, I really wanted to dive myself in as much as I could. And my brain was like a sponge. I try to tell my students now, I'm like, if you can be a sponge and just absorb all the information from the really good people, the really bad people, and then, collectively with learning in school and stuff like that and your experiences, you'll become a better doctor that way. And I truly feel like that's why I am the way I am and what led me to what I'm doing, because I've learned from really great people. I've learned from not so great people. And I've just, dove into areas that maybe weren't my comfort zone or outside of my comfort zone, and really drew me to who I am today. Because there's some cases I have now that I wouldn't have expected to really go for or treat or help. And because I have that experience, it brought me to who I am today. So when she passed away my senior year of high school, I was like, that's it. This is what I got to go to school for. So I did 4 years at Upstate College in New York, SUNY Oneonta, and it was my last choice, actually. I was going to go to Quinnipiac. They had at the time, it was a master's degree. You didn't have to get a doctorate. So it was, I think, a 4.2. I think it was 6 years of school. And I decided to try and save money and go to state school. I thought I was maybe ruining my experience by doing that, but I'm so glad I did, because the doctors I learned from there more than overly prepared me for graduate school, because graduate school seemed like a breeze for me. And so I had really great experiences there. My summers were still filled with volunteering and working as an aide. And then I applied to PT school. And when I applied to PT school, I had a couple of choices. I was going to try and go to Stony Brook. I was going to try and go to New York Institute of Technology. There was a couple other different schools that accepted me. And I knew I wanted to be more of a hands-on therapist. I'm not sure why, maybe just from my experience, but I knew I wanted to do that. And Stony Brook was more neuro-based, and New York Institute of Technology was very manual-based. And there was also 80, I think it was 80 students of a class in Stony Brook, and it was like 35 at New York Tech. So I knew that I would have more one-on-one with the professors. I would have more of a cohesive class when I was at New York Tech. So that was the route I went. And again, super grateful that I did, because my professors were amazing. My manual skills went through the roof, and I was so excited to start there. So midway through PT school, I was diagnosed with stage 2A breast cancer. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, what do you do? I'm working 2 jobs. I'm in the middle of my doctorate program. What do you do? And at the time, I had just started dating my boyfriend to this day, who's my husband. And he was like, we're just going to push. We're just going to push. And you got to keep positive and you got to keep going. My school had said, like, hey, do you want to take a leave of absence? I was like, no. Because knowing me, if I stopped doing everything that I do, I'd probably be worse off if I didn't keep things the way I need to, just keep it moving. So he really helped me get through that time period, because it was rough between school, still working. And before that, I was bodybuilding. So I was just so confused at like getting my train derailed pretty much. But I had a really great support system at home, and we got through that. And then once I finished chemo in February 2016. I was graduating in May. So it was about a year. I did 7 rounds. And I was gonna actually take a job at NYU in the city. It was one of my rotations, and I really loved that place. It was one-on-one. It was always one-on-one with the clients, and it was not bad. My boyfriend was working in the city at the time, so we were gonna move to Brooklyn, and it was gonna be that. But I think both of us had this like recollection, we needed to get out of New York. Like I couldn't heal where I was sick, type thing. So we were either going to go to California or go to Florida. And he had a cousin down in Florida. So we decided okay, we have family that's close. We know someone, we're going to head down to Florida. That was it. We had no money, came down with $127. I remember it, because we were like, how are we going to put rent down for our apartment? And we were stuck in Jacksonville, and we were at this gas station. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I opened up, my bank app, and it just so happened that my taxes had cleared. So we had enough money to put down for the apartment. And it was just like a blessing. So when we came down here, I took the first job I could grab, because we needed to start working. And I met with this CEO and CFO of this company. And to my understanding, I thought I was going to be working with like sports and orthopedics. But then once I showed up, I found out that I was working as a therapist with addicts in recovery. So it was completely different. Nothing I've ever done before, and really out of my comfort area. And I was like, I can't believe I took this job, but I needed a job. And every other place that I took, they were like, oh, you're going to be here for, 10 hours a day, and you're going to be working on 50 patients a day. And I was like, I don't want to run myself into the ground. I haven't even sat for my boards yet. So I took the job, and we talk about like failures and setbacks. We talk about like hard times. It was such a learning curve for me. And it was, honestly, I look back at it and it was a blessing, because if I didn't take this job, I wouldn't have been motivated to get to where I am today. And I wouldn't have had the time to dedicate to doing the stuff that I had today, because in that type of setting, it wasn't like you were in a spot and you were just there for the whole day. I was going in and out of different treatment centers, and I was, treating clients. So we'd be there for like an hour, and then I'd have like a 2-hour, 3-hour break, and then I'd go to another setting, and I was driving all over South Florida. I made my way up to regional manager. Now I'm managing massage therapists, acupuncturists, physical therapy aides, you name it. And I'm having to connect with the therapists and the doctors on staff at these treatment centers. And these clients are going through detox. These clients are going through trauma. These clients are going through, they're out of jail. They're going through so much stuff. So it's not like the typical patients that I've ever been used to, where they're not combative. Sometimes, coming out of detox, you don't know where you are. you have someone trying to like get you to exercise and move. And so it really tested me. And the one clinic that really tested me, it was all males, and I'm a tough chick. A lot of these guys were out of the penitentiary and like, 16 years out. So it was tough, but it really made me have some thicker skin than I already had, to then be like, okay, I see a lot wrong with the medical system between this and the other stuff that's going on in a regular orthopedic setting, which is where they're, it's like a mill. They're running patients. You're a doctor, you see your schedule, you have an hour chunk of time, and you have 5 patients. And that might have 2 evals, or that might have, 3 treatments. And how are you giving quality of care in that time frame? You're not. And I realized that, and I was like, because everything's going off of insurance. And it's not to knock people who work with insurance. It's not to knock people who, have to be in those settings because of their life situation or family situation. They don't have the means to, or the drive to open up their own practice and do that stuff. But I was like, well, am I going to waste my time waiting for the medical system to change and get better to help patients? Or am I going to do it myself and try and show the world that there's another way to help and heal people by giving quality of care treatment? So on my off hours and my Saturdays and Sundays, I started promoting myself a little bit more. I already had a decent following because of bodybuilding on Instagram. My boyfriend was like, let's do a booth at the Fort Lauderdale Fit Expo. This was, I think, 2017. So it was like a year after we moved down. And I was like, but I just started. Like, I just graduated. I just passed my boards. And he was like, you can do it. And I was like, I didn't even know if I really like trusted myself to do it. So we rented a booth. I put it on a business card. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was just ready to go to meet all these people 2 days at this big expo at the Fort Lauderdale Convention Center. And I was like skittish behind. And my boyfriend was like, get out in front. Get out and show them what you're made of. Show them who you are and show them what it's like to receive. I think I worked on like 60 patients one day. I mean, it was like, 5-10 minutes to just meet with people. My line was out the door. My boyfriend's really good at talking to people and showing them who I am and representing me. And it was just like, it just sprung after that. So like word of mouth just went after that. And I just, I picked up speed, and the next thing I know, I'm working Saturdays and Sundays full times. I'm trying to treat clients at their home in between the days I was working, or the times I was working. And I realized I had to, if I was going to burn myself out, I really got to go down to part-time. And the company wasn't too happy about it, but I was like, look, I'm trying to go off and do my own thing. Like, you can't really hate me for that, So I went down to part-time. Now I was even busier. And then I finally just said, okay, when am I going to pull that plug, rip that Band-Aid off, and just full on go off on my own? And it just so happened the company ended up liquidating. I think it was like the end of 2018. And they sent out an email and they're like, hey, the company's closing down. You guys got a month, figure your stuff out. And I was like, I'm grateful that this happened, because this was my liftoff. And I just jumped. And I'm so grateful that I did, because now I'm 5 years down the line, 4 years down the line, and I have a beautiful, small private practice. I am super busy. I have the best patients in the world. And I'm just so grateful for everything and every little step, hardship, not that has brought me to where I'm at today.
Thank you for sharing, Christiana. Why are you laughing?
Because I told you I'm from New York. I can talk.
I mean, I took the best piece right away was when she said best patients. I think she meant me.
Just you.
He was waiting so long to be able to get that out there.
Just talk about the best part. That's a great story, but.
So I have a number of questions, and I thought about interrupting you. I did. It occurred to me. The doc knows it's hard for me not to talk. So
that was the most impressive part, actually.
This is where we can blame you just being tired. I bit my lip. you dealt with some serious hardship working your way to private practice, and I don't want to say you glossed over it because you covered it, but I mean, battling through cancer, most of us struggle to accomplish when we're not facing adversity like that. Uh, I'm just curious, just a little bit more about that and the dealing with cancer. Did you find that it was a lot more challenging to manage to it, or was it galvanizing? I mean, did it really, with the support of your partner, did it really become something where it was an impetus and a motivation to get done? I'm curious how that kind of played out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think for so long, I really wanted this. And I was like, I'm not stopping. Like, this can't stop me. So I think it was also a very motivating factor that I was in such a pivotal point in my career. And it was like, you're not stopping. You've come this far. It's go time. So whatever it is you got to do, you got to push. And a lot of it, too, like I said, my partner, he was like, you got to take all the negative stuff, anything that anybody, doctors or whoever that's like, you need to sit down, you need to take a leave. If you truly in your gut don't feel that, he goes, then do what it is that you want to do. If you want to push, I'm here. If you want to sit down, I'm here. But he motivated me a lot to just keep pushing and keep going. And I'm beyond grateful for that, because I met him only 6 or 7 months before that even happened. So sometimes I feel like things happen for a reason, and he was a big part of that. He was a big blessing to that. So, I think it was just, it was such a crucial time period in my life that it was like sink or swim. I didn't have time to sit down.
Well, and life does happen. So I think there's
course.
something to be said here where it's how do we respond, and how do we respond to life? Because I think for some people that's kind of a turtle up there and crumble situation, right? That's a scenario where it's like, it becomes, and I'm not diminishing, I think what you went through, what a lot of people, end up going through, it must be incredibly challenging, but there's an opportunity to address that and kind of come out on top of something like that. Or there's, alternatively, you can make the choice to, have that beat you a little bit. And I'm not saying, succumb to cancer, but, you had a goal that you were working
Right.
towards during that. So I think it's really a pretty empowering story about what you were able to overcome while you went through that. You brought up the partner and the support from the partner, but I mean, even before that, you had a real passion for this based on the story about your best friend. And did that go through your mind at that stage? I mean, your best friend was dealing with cancer and bone marrow cancer, right?
Mm.
And now you're dealing with cancer as you're trying to kind of achieve the one thing that inspired you. It's a really interesting, I don't want to say coincidence, but you had that kind of cancer in your best friend, and that you're dealing with cancer. Did you kind of look back and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm dealing with this personally again now, and now it's me? Was that a part of I mean your feelings or your thoughts?
It's a good question. I think I was so young at that point, when she passed. I mean, not that it was like that much of an age difference, but I might not have looked at it like that. I think it was more of a push thing. Like, she pushed for so long at such a young age, and she was always inspiring me, that she did do it. So I was like, well, I can't sit down and look like I'm weak. She's watching me from up above. Like, I can't let for a second, my foot off the pedal. And don't get me wrong, like, there are days and times where I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to fight. But that's where, like I said, it was the support structure around me that was really, like, those days that were hard was like, no, get going, like, get your shoes on, let's go. And that's what I was to her, and that's what her family was to her. So, I guess I didn't really think of it at the time, but it was more of a motivating factor. Like, she's watching, don't give up. And she's with me every step of the way. And I knew that. So yeah, I guess in a way I thought about it like that, but I guess too, it was just I was in such a different age bracket too. I think my thinking was completely different.
Yeah. So I mean, the time frame here, you dealt with cancer directly impacting you twice at very young ages. I mean, you were what, early 20s with the breast cancer? Is my timing
So
right on that?
yeah, I was 22,
Wow.
and when she was diagnosed originally, we were 13. So yes, and then my older sister has dealt with um, cis, ovarian and uterine cancer, 2 years before. So it was a very, vivid thing around me. And it, and especially on Long Island, I know people say this all the time, but like, it was like everyone had someone that they knew went through cancer. It was a very, something about Long Island, they say the water, I don't know, but it's like I feel like everyone I knew had someone or some relative or a mother or father that dealt with cancer. And plus, September 11th, that had so many people, especially the helpers and the police officers and fire department, a lot of those guys dealt with cancer. So, and that was very close in my community. So it was a very, I don't want to say it was like a normal thing, but it was like, it's not like it was unheard of that someone had cancer. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was a word that was always in my vocabulary.
I mean, it's just really impressive to me. The poise, right, required to handle something like that. The maturity, I think, just to manage that at such a young age and to continue on with your pursuit and your goals is really impressive. I mean, I just don't know how else to put it. It's just it's astonishing to me. I don't think most young people have that level of poise, and it's really impressive. So, excuse me. Speaking of poise and maturity and being a doctor of physical therapy. Yeah, I don't know a tremendous amount about physical therapy, but I don't feel like most people are doctors of physical therapy. So is that I mean, that seems like pretty advanced level of education relative to the industry. Is that accurate?
Well, nowadays you're probably going to see more of it because, like I had said in my introduction, when I first started, it was mandatory more of a master's. And then when I hit my sophomore year, that was when like the whole American Physical Therapy Association said, hey, you guys all need to have your doctorates, because we're sometimes the first line of defense for some people. Like people will be like, I'll go to a physical therapist. And instead of going to like an orthopedic, like something hurts, I'm going to go to a physical therapist, or I'm going to go to a chiropractor, right? So sometimes we're the first line of defense. And I think the medical community figured out that there are certain things that we can do as practitioners to diagnose, to make sure that something is treatable for us or it's not. So, and what I mean by that is we need to be able to decipher when a client comes in and let's say they're having shoulder pain, to be able to say, hey, this is something that we can treat, or the way that it's presenting and the history and the family history and all the history that comes with it, comorbidities and stuff. Is it something we're not supposed to be treating? Is it heart related? Is it gallbladder related? Is it cancer in the bone? Is it? So we have to learn to be that first line of defense for patients and say, hey, look, this is something we can treat, or look, this isn't in my scope of practice, and I really think you should go see this doctor or an orthopedic or whatever, because it's not presenting the way I would expect it to for typical shoulder pain. And plus your heart rate's out of control. And so now we're diagnosing at a level, which is amazing, to be that first line of defense for patients and say, hey, look, if I were to keep treating your shoulder pain, and it was getting better, now I'm negligent and I'm liable. Let's say they had bone cancer going on and it wasn't getting better with typical treatment. And now you're 6 months, 8 months down the road, and this person's been dealing with cancer and now you've attributed to it. So they're now putting on us to be that first line of defense. So that's where the doctorate year came in, because it was a whole year of like diagnosing and learning about systemic issues and how it can present as orthopedic pain. So, that's where that whole transition came in, which was my sophomore year of college.
It's helpful. And from my perspective, always better to see an industry really embrace moving towards education requirements. Yeah, it's amazing to me. I spent a career, and I still am, in the financial services industry. and the burden to become a quote unquote financial advisor is minimal. I mean, you can pass an insurance license exam and can call yourself a financial advisor of some sort, or, however you want to name it, because there's not enough regulation around that. And we see that in the coaching and consulting world too, where we have a lot of people who dabble in psychotherapy and probably in topics that they really ought not to be putting themselves into. And I don't want to speak on your behalf, Doc, but it's something we've talked about before in the podcast, where it's a little bit of the wild, wild west, and it would be helpful to see the industry continue to do what your industry has done, which is just move towards requiring more and more education.
I think that Doc can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that one of the wonderful things that I witnessed when I was working at NYU was I was working with all chronic pain patients, and we worked alongside. This is the first clinic I've ever, witnessed. I worked alongside a CBT therapist, which is a cognitive behavioral therapist. So the client would have an hour or so with the CBT therapist, and then we'd have an hour of treatment time from a physical therapy standpoint, because they talk a lot about these biopsychosocial disorders that come around when someone's dealing with somewhat of a chronic pain pattern. So we were looking to ask in our history about certain things. How's their family life? How's their social life? Certain things, because what they're finding in the psych world is that there's sometimes with chronic pain patients, there's also a psych component to it. So have they had suicidal thoughts? Did they go through a divorce? Did they go through, cancer treatment and, lose a spouse, or did they lose a custody battle? And and then all of a sudden you get these scans for their brain or their neck, and there's nothing wrong from a structural standpoint, but they've had 10 years of chronic neck pain. So I feel like the psych world is going to start changing, hopefully. I mean, again, Doc can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my standpoint, what I see is that was a big eye opener for me, that they're diving into, okay, it might not just be a psychological, thing, or it's just a orthopedic thing. Pain comes in different forms, and can the brain play a big role in that? And that's, absolutely.
Well, we know, mind-body connection is there. And I think we underestimate the ability of stress puts on ourselves, right? And over 90% of the people that go to the emergency room thinking they're having a heart attack are really just stressed out. And, we don't realize how much those physical effects happen from our day-to-day. We don't take in things considering, like, are we dehydrated? Did I not get enough sleep? That's going to relate to pain. That's going to relate to how we're functioning. So there's a lot of interconnection, which is why we really need to have more whole body care, where all doctors are working in conjunction with each other. It should be able to easily to communicate how we can improve care. The time in the system doesn't allow for that yet, but hopefully we get there someday.
Yes. And that's been something that I've really cherished with my practice, is that I spend an hour and a half with each client. Now, that's different from your typical orthopedic setting where they might get 5 minutes with a doctor. And I have patients that come in and they might just come in straight, sit on my couch and start bawling their eyes out. Can you imagine spending 5 minutes with them and just being like, okay, but like, I gotta go. I gotta get to my next patient. And it's terrible. So I'm building people around me, which is a beautiful thing, where I can say, look, I understand you're going through a lot. I'm going to help you on this part. I'm going to help you on the therapy part. We're going to work on this. But I suggest that you go see, my friend, Dr. Andre, to get help from that standpoint, whatever it is that you're working through. So, like I said, I think the beautiful thing about what we're doing at this level of being an entrepreneur or private practice in the medical field and Dr. Andre's field is that now we can start actually being effective at a level that we need to for individuals. It might be very micro right now, but it can become very macro. And if we educate more people on that, and there's more people that are doing it the way we're doing it, I pray and I hope, maybe in my lifetime, maybe not, that stuff will change.
I want to pick at this a little bit. So in your practice, you mentioned you're doing 90-minute appointments with people, which relative to, I take it this is private pay, not non-insurance. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
And that modeling is what allows you to spend 90 minutes as opposed to 5 minutes with people. So your time with people is going well beyond a traditional and typical physical therapy experience that somebody would have with most other providers.
Correct.
Am I about right? Okay. So do you find yourself then acting as more than a doctor of physical therapy in your mind?
Of course.
To the extent that in some sense you are, and you know, I'm going to be careful here, but you are kind of sitting in a therapist role where you're just listening to people and allowing them to kind of psychologically air some of what's going on in addition to their physical manifestations of pain or struggle, right?
Correct. And like I said, there's a big overlap. And that's why I'm really grateful that I did what I did at NYU, because I'm able to look at flags. I'm able to listen and see those things. And I'm not a therapist, but I'm able to recognize when someone might be on the edge or verge of something. And look, we have to make sure we're taking care of this now, because how terrible would that be that I let that person walk out of the office and I didn't offer them some sort of guidance or solution to making sure that their head's clear. Because you never want to have that day where you get a call that something happened, God forbid, and you're part of their treatment plan or you're part of their care. And that's why I say to my patients all the time, and I might be maybe someone in the medical field, maybe my professors, maybe someone out there will say, look, you're overstepping by saying, hey, if you need something, just text me, just call me. I don't care what time of day it is. But I'd rather be somebody's person to, at least know that they're not alone with things, because some people are. And I'd rather them know that someone's there. And yes, I'm just a physical therapist, but I'm a lot more than that for some people. And that allows me to put my head on my pillow at night and know that I've done everything that I could from my standpoint to make sure that that person is relatively okay.
Right. Well, it speaks to just what makes you unique. You're more than just a physical therapist to a lot of the people that you work with. Doc, you want to say something?
Well, and related back to like our world of business, and I think this is what's so effective and why Doc has such a great practice is because of that level of care, right? I get beat up by her every few weeks, and I've learned how to get beat up by her because if I was referred to her by a couple other people that I know individually, both were going to see her and they get beat up by her. That's our term, our affectionate term for her. We like to say she tortures us, but in a great way. But the reason these two different people individually refer to me is because if you're doing a great job, that's how it gets around, right? You refer. And we talked about that, a few podcasts ago about the power of referrals and why we want to create that business aspect. But doing a great job is what gets that out there, and that's what helps your business to grow. So I want to just kind of connect it because we have a lot of entrepreneurs out there that might not be in the medical field and are wondering, what's a good business aspect of it. We don't realize how much of it, what we do in therapy world, physical therapy world, finance world is related to actual business.
Yeah. Well, it's to me, there's nothing's ever in a vacuum. And I really think, when we treat within a vacuum of any sort, whether it's as a financial services professional, whether it's a therapist, or a physical therapist, or a mental therapist, there's something to be said about not doing it within a vacuum. There's a lot of moving pieces. Our lives are all kind of puzzle pieces that connect together in a lot of different ways. And so to look at something purely in a vacuum ignores the bigger picture a lot of times, and it leaves a lot on the table as a professional. So there's something to be said about being able to go beyond the scope of your technical expertise to be able to provide greater service to somebody and to really provide a unique experience for somebody. I'm curious, I'm going to ask this question to both of you. So I'm going to pose this first to my doc and then to Dr. Christiana here. So my doc, in your experience, how often is somebody who's going to deal with something physically, is there a mental component there that should be addressed in your mind? Is it all the time? Is it everybody who's dealing with something physical probably should also be comprehensively looking at the mental side, the psychological side as well?
Well, I mean, my obvious answer is always going to be yes, right? I think everyone should be in some form of therapy, whether
that's why I keep you around.
Traditional mental health, or it is just, it is that kind of connection of people that just can listen.
So your opinion's everybody. Everybody really should kind of.
Everyone really should, but especially if you're dealing with something that is a struggle, right? If you're constant pain or not being able to do things the way you used to, there's some processing that has to go along with that, and you have to kind of get through some of those blocks. And Dr. Christiana does a great job in her world of doing that. And if you can counterbalance that with someone who, it goes back to the whole person of care, right? You should have the specialist in each area. Sometimes it gets a bit costly, and you have to kind of spread that out a little bit. But sure, there should always be some sort of connection.
Okay. And Dr. Christiana, in your opinion and your experience on the physical therapy side, how often are you kind of seeing an obvious link there? So rather than, saying, hey, maybe everybody, which might be your opinion, I'm just curious, are you often seeing a direct link where you can kind of say, hey, there's more here than just the physical that needs to be addressed?
I would say I see it more often than maybe like your typical therapist in a regular setting, because I am working with clients that are probably at wit's end. I know that sounds terrible, but they've done the regular physical therapy route.
Right.
They're still dealing with pain. They're still dealing with all this trauma that's yet to be dealt with. And so I do see more of it, and I encourage it. And some of them listen, some of them don't, which is, also I can't tip them over the edge to the point of saying, but if there's a case where I'm really concerned, I will pose that. But I do think nowadays, with the way the world is and the stressors we all go through nowadays, I find more than often everyone should be going in that type of direction or whatever, even if it's not a physical therapy thing and it's just one of my athletes that are coming in for some recovery stuff. I end up hearing a lot on the table. It's kind of like your barber, you go to the barber, you go to your hairdresser, and you word vomit all over the place, and you spew out all the stuff about, your spouse or, your friend or whoever. There's always some underlying mental work that should be done. And I think if, like Dr. Andre said, if more people were to do that mental work, would we have the world that we're living in today? So I'm in agreement with him on that.
So it's interesting because you mentioned, hey, a lot of times you're dealing with people at their wits' end. So it sounds as if some at least of your business is people who have exhausted the normal approach. So maybe you're seeing a little bit more of this than not. But there's a reason that's a business model, right? There's a reason that there's enough people for you to have as a private practice where it's like, hey, this is very, very real. And it just reminds me of a throwback conversation, Doc, all the way back to year one on the podcast, Jessica Mantell, talking about even the gut connection with the mind and physical health. It's all interrelated. And I think, it just kind of, it points out and emphasizes that, we need to be looking at everything and how it all interacts. Again, back to the puzzle analogy, right? There's a lot of pieces there in different parts of our lives and physical and mental health and well-being that need to be addressed.
Well, you only get one body, you only get one brain, so you got to make sure you take care of them and put them all together.
Yeah.
We have talked a lot today about a lot of the struggles and, the hard parts of what we do. And I'm putting we in there because, it is one of those things that we do. We get to hear a lot of trauma. We get to hear a lot of the bad stories. But there is things that keep us going. And I was just wondering if you have any good stories, something that's a real good success story. I know you have a lot of them, but any success stories that you want to share with us that might, leave us on a good tone for the day.
Yes, and she stands out to me all the time. And I'm sure if you scroll on my Instagram, you'd be able to see that video. There's this little girl that has my heart, and her name is Nyla. And I actually met her father when I did the Fort Lauderdale Fit Expo. So it goes back to that first blip of getting my introduction to the Fort Lauderdale city. And he had asked me, he's like, have you ever worked with pediatrics? And I was like, yeah, I actually have. So he said, look, I have a daughter who's got a rare genetic disorder. Her legs are really bowed out, meaning like they're kind of out, and she can't walk. She doesn't communicate. And she's dealing with pain. She can't communicate the pain, but she winces a lot. And she was also working at Joe DiMaggio's because they were setting her up for a surgery. So I said, well, okay, let me know. I'm going to come by. And this is obviously, I didn't have a place yet. So I was going to their house. I was going once a week on the weekend. And she was about 6 or 7 at that point, or 5 or 6. And I had to do basic level, almost infant goals with her because she didn't have your basic normal function that a normal child would develop into. But she just tugged on my heartstrings, and I would have to carry her up and down the stairs because she couldn't walk. So I started off with doing like tummy time, belly stuff, all this stuff that you would do almost with an infant, and the goals you would hit with an infant, but I'm doing it at 5 or 6 with her. And the transformation is amazing. And maybe I could link you guys that video, and I don't know how I could even send it, but she now is walking with 2 feet, swinging her arms, doing her thing. And it took us a year and change, and a lot of work on the parents' part, and a lot of work with other therapists and telling them what they needed to do with her. But every little blip you get to see, like her just standing, that was a big achievement for her. And the next was I got her in a walker, and she could not stand the walker. And then she started liking the walker. And then she got to literally just walking without any help and just with her arms up, walking into school, because then she could finally go to school. And that's when I knew, and I did it with very little equipment. I did it with very little, nothing fancy, just my knowledge. And she had a strong will to work with me. And that was the moment I knew, like, you are really good at what you do. You might second guess yourself sometimes, but don't forget that, like, what you've done for this little girl speaks volumes, because her mom texts me for her birthday. Her mom texts me. Now they're in North Carolina now, but she texts me all the time, sends me videos of her just living her life and doing her thing as she can with the diagnosis that she has. And, you're talking 2-3 years later after the fact. And that it's always just a constant reminder for me, like, you have this power and it's so great, and you got to just keep sharing it. And if you can help one person, you can help a lot of people. And that is the one that sits with me all the time.
It's amazing the changes we can make in the world, right? And sometimes it's easy to doubt our ability to do so. And then you get a story like that where you've actively changed somebody's world and been a part of that. And I'm certain it took a lot of hard work from a lot of people, including your patient, Nyla. But it's an incredible life-changing story. So love hearing things like that. Dr. Christiana, absolute pleasure to have you on and joining us, and to share a little bit, not just about your journey, but some of the struggles and some of the really cool success stories like that. That's really neat.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on today. It meant a lot.
And real quickly, if people want to get beat up by you and feel what this torture is like, of course I say that with love, how would they get a hold of you?
You can go to my website, which is www.drchristianamarron.com, or you can find me on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way to also reach me directly. And my handle is just that. It's just DR Christiana Marron. No periods, no spaces, nothing.
And of course, we'll put all that in the show notes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm kind of half upset that we did this remote, because I feel like I could have actually experienced the 2-for-1 power physical and psychological therapy with the two of you, but maybe it's better that I didn't. I'm also a little intimidated here. There's too many docs flying around today. I'm used to saying doc, you're saying doc, then he's calling you doc. I'm very, very confused already.
We all need a drink.
I need a doc in my name. I feel I got to go back to school or something. A
Oh
little
boy, look what you
undereducated.
started off.
He just wants to be a super friend.
Yeah, right. Jeez. All right, Dr. Christiana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Well, Doc, as always, I love having people that are smarter and more credentialed than me on the podcast. I only get a little uncomfortable with being the stupidest person in the room.
You should be used to it by now.
I'm starting to be. Apparently, there's a whole league of super friends I am not a part of, will never be a part of, and can only be on the outside looking in, like stuck behind a wall of glass over here.
I love when we bring the super friends on. I had Dr. Toby and Dr. P, and
I'm gonna have to start vetting out our guests more often. And if there's doctor of anything in there, I'm gonna just cross.
You cannot cross off the super friends.
No.
Meanwhile, back at the Hall of Justice.
Right. What was your top takeaway from the conversation today?
There's a lot. I mean, just what I appreciate, and this probably is not even what you would think of a takeaway, but for me, in my world, it makes sense. It's just the struggle of doing business and relating it to healthcare. And didn't get a chance to ask her, but I can guarantee the answer. She didn't have any classwork around how to build a business, because that's not something they teach you in medical school. It's not teach anything they teach you in physical therapy school. It's definitely not anything they teach you in clinical psych school, right? So the instinct that comes from that to go out there and push and all the struggles that you heard, kind of builds that character to get out there. And her practices like slammed. Try to get an appointment. It's not easy.
Yeah, I'm gonna carry on that a little bit further and just go. Her business model is not the traditional physical therapy business model, obviously, and there's something to be said about recognizing that what a traditional platform or professional service is in your field does not mean that's what you need it to be, right? And you can carve out and build out your own business that aligns with what's important to you and be really successful at it. You do not have to kind of follow that boxed in model, right? You got a box with four corners that a lot of people try to plant themselves in with the business, and it's just not necessary. And in fact, I would argue that's probably a more difficult space to play in. It might take a little bit more effort to build out a business like Dr. Marron has, but to your point, try to get an appointment with her. It's really tough because she's found an opportunity to serve a market that was not being served by the traditional in a box platform. So I think that's pretty cool. And there's a real lesson to take away as a business owner and a professional about maybe being a unique service provider, a unique professional provider relative to what the industry you're in would kind of suggest.
Right, find your niche, but the thing that drove that the most was her passion, right? So finding that, don't find a niche just to find a niche. Make sure that that's your passion, and then it will be natural to succeed. Yeah, absolutely. A pretty cool conversation. So, again, if this was your first time listening to us, a really unique conversation with a unique business owner out there with a lot of great takeaways. Give us a like, a subscribe, a follow. If you're continuing to listen, this is not your first episode, we appreciate you and hope you got a little something out of this conversation today, as always. And you're welcome to get in touch with us either via our DMs or where else can they find us, Doc? Of course, you can find us at our website at jbandthedoctor.com or on all our social media at jbandthedoctor. You can listen to our podcast. You can read our blog. And you can also get our free gift. Tell them what that is, JB.
Yeah, 6 methods to make sure that your business does not fail. You can get it right off our website, front and center, first page. Just some of the top reasons businesses struggle and some easy actionable tips to make sure that it's your competition failing and not you.
Of course. That was a beautiful summary. I liked it. I was like admired by it.
Well, you know, I'm about to sign off. I'm done. This is when a good salesperson shuts up.
I wanted to leave you on a high.
All right. Well, everybody, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm JB, and I am out.
Peace out, yo.